So today I want to talk about one of the most important fundamentals for improving your bot lane gameplay, the most important facet to winning fights on bot lane, the single biggest, most impactful tip that will dramatically improve your laning performance on bot lane. It is 3 words that will change the way you approach every bot lane fight. Those 3 simple words are focus the carry. Sounds obvious, right? Well, you might think you understand it, but trust me, you don't. There's a lot more to the subject than you realize, so I'm going to talk about it and provide some clips to show examples of what I'm talking about, starting with this clip of a bot lane fight in one of my Diamond 1 games. On the surface, this looks like the Tristana, I'm just getting hooked twice and got caught, and the main mistake in this clip is that I'm not respecting thresh hooks, right? Well, actually, this fight only happened because I wasn't afraid of getting hooked and because I knew that we win the 2v2s in this matchup. And even after getting hooked, we only lost the fight because the Diamond 1 Nami didn't focus Vayne. I don't know if you noticed, but throughout the entire clip from the moment I got hit by the first hook, Nami hasn't hit Vayne once. All of her damage has gone onto Thresh. So because I was so convinced that this should have been a good fight for us, I did the math of how much damage we missed out on from Nami's bad focus, and it confirmed that this really wasn't as bad a fight as it looks. Nami could have potentially hit Vayne 4 times throughout the clip, but by the time I died she hadn't hit her a single time except with 1 W before the fights even started. Nami autos were doing 41 damage, so that's already 164 missed damage onto Vayne. Spell Thieves, which at the time still dealt damage, would have procced on one of those autos, which was doing 10 damage, so 174 damage missed. She didn't use Ignite, which was doing 90 damage, so that adds up to 264 damage missed. And if she'd ignited before the Vayne heal, which was very realistic since Vayne heal was even later than mine, she would have removed 42 HP from its healing, adding up to 306 damage missed. Vayne at the time that I died had 341 HP, which followed by a Nami auto attack with a newly acquired Spell Thieves proc took her down to 291 HP, and her newly acquired Aerie did another 11 damage and dropped her down to 280 HP. With the 306 damage Nami missed out on prior to that throughout the clip, that means the Vayne should have died either at the same time as me or even before me, which would have given me a chance to flash out, recover HP from Triumph, and survive. And that changes things, doesn't it? Because even if we don't count the very first of the missed potential autos, since I took this fight already knowing that Vayne's HP was 51 HP healthier than it should be, she was still well within the range of making this an even trade and possibly even an outplayable situation, rather than the fight that it actually ended up being, where it just looks like I'm getting caught and refusing to flash away and my death is no one's fault but mine. This was a perfectly reasonable fight to take, but it was Nami's focus that made it look stupid. Even though I made mistakes, this was still a perfectly winnable fight, and the only reason it didn't look that way is because Nami wasn't focusing the right target. But this is a Diamond 1 Nami, and not only that, but she was also my pre-made. I was doing with her specifically because in most ways, she was better than the average supports at this elo, and still she didn't properly understand this fundamental of focusing the carry and ended up throwing our lane this game because of it. So between this and all the other clips I'll be showing in this video, which all take place between Diamond 1 and Master and Mamar, it should be very obvious that the simple concept of focusing the carry isn't actually as well understood as you think it is. And it's very easy, even at the highest level, for people to make the mistake of not focusing the carry when they should have, instead going for targets that are nearer, more vulnerable, or lower HP, even if it means that the carry is then going to clean them up after they get the kill. To start off, I'm going to show you one of the more extreme examples showcasing how one side focusing the carry while the other doesn't can yield an advantage to the one focusing the carry. In this clip, the enemy bot lane, which includes the bot lane Syndra, blow all their cooldowns except for Syndra ult onto my support Vel'Koz, who dies before he really gets to do anything. But despite the enemy bot lane being full HP and having the numbers advantage, I go in on Syndra anyway because they've wasted all their damage and CC on my support and have nothing left to kill me with. Syndra has her ult still and has a low cooldown on Q, but those alone aren't enough to kill me this early on in the game, and Alistar autos may as well not be a factor. Lee ends up picking up an assist with his shield, but I finish killing Syndra without a single hit from Lee, and most of his shield goes unused anyway. This was a fight where my support died without getting to contribute anything before I was even in the fight, so I couldn't start putting out damage until it was already dead, and we still win the fight because they didn't focus the carry while I did. To most players, this scenario would seem like one of those exceptions where focusing the support is fine because you can burst them so fast anyway, but as you can see, it clearly wasn't, since even full HP in a 2v1, they had no answer for the Twitch who cleans the fight up. This clip is the perfect example of how even some of the freest looking picks can still be bad to go for if it requires you to invest too many cooldowns onto the support. Note how if I'd focused Alistar instead of Syndra, there was no chance that he would die because of his ult, and the moment his cooldowns came back up, I would end up dying to the combined burst as Syndra's cooldowns returned too. But in actuality, even while Syndra's running for me and Alistar's in melee range, I never switch focus to Alistar and start kiting him. I always completely ignore him and keep going on Syndra. And it's this refusal to dedicate any time whatsoever towards hitting the support that turns a pick onto my support into a 1-for-1 in our favor. So why is this strategy so ridiculously effective? Just why is it so important that you always focus the carry? To simplify it as much as possible, when you focus down one of the enemy bot laners and force them to retreat while the other one is still freely hitting you, you are going to take way more damage if the ADC is the one still freely hitting you compared to if they're the ones being forced onto the retreat and it's the support trying to clean you up. Even when the support does a lot of damage, it's still true that you are going to take more DPS from the ADC than the support in that situation. For example, Zyra does a lot of damage, but it takes her 1 second to use that damage. Once she's cast her spells, it doesn't matter anymore whether she lives or dies, or runs away, or keeps fighting, her spells will have already burst you and her plants will already be attacking you. Her contribution to the fight is already pretty much over, and the DPS she can contribute by staying in the fight from that moment onwards is very small. The only way it could be useful to focus her is if you can CC her and burst her down before she can even use her spells, but if you happen to fail at that, she's just going to mash every button on her keyboard, and just like that, she's contributed everything she needs to contribute, meaning everything you devoted to kill her before she had a chance to cast her spells has gone to waste, and is no longer available to address the AD carry, who's the more permanent threat. And I actually have a clip available where you can watch this exact scenario play out in a real game. The fight begins with Zyra getting hooked, and she ends up tanking Thresh Hook, Thresh Flay, and Xayah E. And what happens? Even while tanking a tower shot, she still uses her Q, W, and E, and leaves the fight having contributed all she has to contribute while they have no cooldowns left to address me. Now unfortunately I screwed up really badly in this clip because I took not just one but 2 unnecessary tower shots, which ends up turning this into a 1-for-1 instead of the clean kill on Xayah that it should have been. But it still works out in our favor due to the position of the waves. This was the worst possible execution, and it still works and even saves Zyra just because while they focus the support, I focus the carry. And even though they focus Zyra, she still hit all of her spells on Xayah, exactly the same as she would have done if she hadn't been getting focused in the first place. The damage and CC they used on Zyra brought them close to getting 300 extra gold from her death, but it made virtually no progress at all on actually winning the fight. Since if I'm doing the correct thing and focusing their carry, then they can't really win the fight until I'm out of it, either dead or forced to retreat. Now, fortunately, I can actually show you how this exact scenario plays out when I don't screw up, because believe it or not, their bot lane was actually dumb enough to try it again. This time Zyra unfortunately dies to the very last ignite tick, but again we're the ones who ultimately win the fight because focusing Zyra doesn't stop her pressing QWE on Xayah. And I'm aware enough to see that I have an opportunity to kill Xayah because of it, and because of the fact that they don't have any abilities left to stop me. In all of these clips, it's always my DPS that's turning the fights around because the enemy bot lane ignores it in favor of killing my support. Sometimes they succeed in killing my support, sometimes my support gets away and the enemies find it's too late to start focusing me because I've already done too much damage. But regardless, every single time where my support was in danger of dying, the simple act of me walking up and hitting the enemy carry forces the enemy bot lane to give up what would otherwise be a free kill on my support because I'm putting them in a position where they focus me or they die. And most of the time it's already too late, because they already started off focusing my support and already committed cooldowns onto it. For example, here's a clip where the enemy bot lane instantly turns on me once I go in on the enemy carry, but it's too late because they already invested all their cooldowns on my support. At the start of the fight while I'm hitting Pyke, notice that I use no spells whatsoever, not even Q, until I eventually jump in on Kai'Sa. This is because they haven't yet made the mistake of committing everything onto Nautilus yet. If I go in now, they still have all their abilities left to fight back with, so I do the only safe option of hitting Pyke, but not making the mistake of committing valuable cooldowns onto him. Once Pyke starts casting Q, I try to juke it, but it turns out to be unnecessary since he was aiming for the Nautilus anyway, followed by chain CCing him with his E as well. Now that Pyke has everything on cooldown, I know for a fact that I could kill Kai'Sa 1v2, so I jump in on her. Kai'Sa immediately turns away from Nautilus and turns her attention to me, and Pyke likewise ignores the low HP Nautilus and turns to me instead, but at this point the damage is already done. Kai'Sa got hit by Nautilus Q, Nautilus E, Nautilus W, and Nautilus passive, and proceeded to get hit by every spell in my kit as well, which I'd been saving for that very moment. while both Pyke and Kai'Sa impatiently blew everything that they had on Nautilus. In this case, it doesn't matter that they didn't ignore me when I jumped on Kai'Sa because they couldn't deal with me without their cooldowns, so the moment they blew them all on Nautilus, they already lost the fight. By the time I jumped in, the damage was already done and there was nothing they could do to salvage the situation. And notice that Nautilus being too tanky to die in that situation wasn't the issue here, because even if he had died, this trade still would have been valuable for us. Whether Nautilus survived or not, they lost this fight because they focused the support while we focused their carry. By now, I think I've already done a good job highlighting how fights are won or lost based on which bot lane more correctly follows the fundamental of focusing the carry. But I'm just going to play some more clips of me winning and turning around mostly unfavorable fights by ignoring the support and focusing the carry while the enemies make the mistake of not doing the same. And let me preface this by saying that these clips are not cherry picked in the slightest. I went through my replays and found fights showcasing the effectiveness of this principle in almost every game that I'd played on that patch over the previous 2 days. And so you will see that most of these clips are from the same games, because of how common it is even in Diamond 1 for fights to be decided by a huge gap in understanding of this fundamental. And because these games are all in Diamond 1 to Master MMR, they serve as the perfect example of how this is not a subject that everyone past Bronze understands to perfection. It is a complicated subject, which I tend to execute better than my opponents, simply because I put a lot more thought into it than they do, since I know how important it is. Even in this elo, people constantly get sidetracked by factors like which champion is already closer to them and which champion is already lower HP. And the following clips show what happens when you let yourself get distracted by this stuff against an opponent who understands that the ultimate target to focus in any fight is the carry. Here, when they try and kill Nautilus, I immediately bully Ezreal out of the fight. Only once he's zoned out do I turn on Bard, and when Ezreal tries to re-enter the fight again, I immediately turn back to him and kill him as he greedily commits to Nautilus regardless. Here, Shaco makes the mistake of focusing Nautilus, and Bard isn't able to peel me off of Ezreal before I kill him. The result is that the fight is already looking really good for us even before Taliyah joins in and helps us clean up, since they don't have the damage of their ADC to clean up themselves. Here, Tristana goes on Rammus instead of me, and even though me and Rammus are both extremely low, I just focus a similarly low Tristana while she's ignoring me, and I kill her after she kills Rammus, making it a favorable trade for me overall. Here, Rammus fails an engage and gets massively chunked out. But rather than leaving it at that, Tristana tries to fully commit for the kill and dies to me in the process, forgetting once again that an ADC can't survive getting focused freely by another ADC. This is only a level 1 fight, so in theory this should be really close, but we stomp it hard because both me and Thresh hit only Lucian until we've successfully forced him out of the fight, while Gragas blows E and 2 autos on Thresh, which as you've learned isn't conductive to winning fight, as a fight is only won or lost once either ADC has been forced out of the fight, either through death or not being able to safely hit anyone. Once Lucian is out, we turn on Gragas, and then immediately turn back onto Lucian when he gets into range again, never letting him freely hit us. Although this particular fight doesn't end up being a kill for either side, this trade was so ridiculously favored to us that I can even afford to take a tower shot and still be massively up on HP to both of them, while Thresh is also really far up in HP. Although in this clip Nautilus makes the mistake of focusing Leona because he thinks her being low makes her the best target, both Vayne and Leona make the mistake of focusing Nautilus. One player correctly understanding the fundamental beats 0 players understanding it, and I kill Vayne right after Leona dies to my AoE in the process even though she wasn't my primary target. Although this ends up making it look like a really fancy outplay, Leona could have dodged all my AoE and I still would have killed Vayne and won the fight off of Vayne focusing Nautilus while I focus Vayne. The double kill is just the cherry on top, and the main thing to take away is how much of a stomp it was even without the Leona collateral kill as a result of my focusing the carry. As you can see, in most of these clips there were no flashy outplays to win the fight. I just won those fights because every time the enemy bot lane committed onto my support, I in turn committed onto the enemy AD carry. Often my support would die and I would just clean up the enemy carry, but sometimes my support would even end up surviving because I could kill the enemy carry before they could finish killing my support. Or they would have to stop focusing my support and turn to me instead, but still die because they had nothing left to hit me with. Even when the enemy bot lane has a frontline support, I just ignore them and literally walk past them to hit the carry even though it puts me in range of being focused by both of them, where most people would just kite the front line. And the only reason I can get away with doing that when it should be inting is because these frontline supports just keep wasting their cooldowns and having nothing left to threaten me with. Bot lane fights almost always come down to a race in who can force one side's ADC out of the fight first, either by killing them or by getting them low enough that they're zoned out of the fight. Pretty much the only time this isn't true is when both sides hold on to their important cooldowns for so long that the supports end up dropping really low just to auto attacks or low value abilities that end up becoming worthwhile to commit cooldowns just to finish them off. For example, it's more valuable to commit a Lucian Q onto support if it's going to immediately kill them, compared to using Lucian Q while the support is still 40% HP. Basically, think of that Tristana Nautilus versus Kai'Sa Pyke clip that I showed you earlier, and how at the start of it, I was just autoing Pyke without committing cooldowns. If they had never ended up committing their cooldowns either, rather than jumping onto Kai'Sa, I would have kept autoing Pyke until he either left the fight or dropped so low that I would end up trying to commit my cooldowns to finish him off. Even if I couldn't afford to use my E on him, I could still jump on him once he was low enough to realistically die, and then use my E on Kai'Sa if she ever tried to turn on me. This is the sort of circumstance where a fight can actually be decided by a race of whose support dies first rather than whose ADC dies first, and it's only as a result of both sides respecting the fundamental of focusing the ADC that they delay using valuable cooldowns on the support as long as possible, since if they lack the discipline to hold their cooldowns, then the other side will instantly commit all the cooldowns onto the carry and win. Even when the carry doesn't end up being focused, those fights are still only won through both sides following the fundamental of focusing the carry. That's about all I have to say on this subject, so I hope you guys all found this video helpful. I really do think that this is probably the most important video that you will ever see on the subject of bot lane fights, and I'm sure it'll help you understand the outcome of fights outside of bot lane as well, where the fundamental of focusing a damage dealer until they're zoned out of the fight will also help you. Make sure to subscribe to see more informational videos like these, as well as gameplay videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video.